The J. Michael Show.
Welcome to the show. Today, my guest is my dear friend Vanessa Angel. We're going to talk about her career and her life and everything. But first, let's say hello to Vanessa.
Hi, how are you? I'm so happy to see your face.
I'm so happy to see you. And well, wait a minute. You said you can't see me, right? It's a one-way transmission.
No, because I don't have my glasses on, and you know the audience doesn't know this, but we had a little bit of a hiccup, like trying to get connected.
Yeah.
And so I'm actually doing it on my phone and not on my laptop, so I can't see anything that small.
Well,
but I do see you wearing a hat. You're wearing the cowboy hat, and you got a blue shirt on, I believe.
Yeah. Well, this is my signature hat and my signature blue vest, and I got to look consistent. That's what they tell me. Always look consistent. So that's what I'm doing. So we're going to talk a little bit about your career. We're going to talk a little bit about just what's going on with you now. But so the audience knows who Vanessa Angel is, in case you don't. She was Claudia on Kingpin with Woody Harrelson, Lisa in the Weird Science TV show, not the movie, the TV show. And she's been from model to actress. And let me begin by asking you, how did you get started in modeling?
Well, I actually was sitting in a restaurant in London. I remember it was like Easter break, and I wanted to go window shopping with my mom. And we lived about 25 minutes from central London, so it was sort of a treat to go into London with my mom. And we sat at this restaurant, and these two women came up to me and was like, "Oh my gosh, you've got the right look to be a model." And I'm 15, I'm still at school, and so, we sort of, took it in one ear and out the other. But I took their card, and then my dad actually, when we got home the next day, my dad kind of checked out who they were, and they happened to be like a really reputable, great model agency in London. So that's kind of so then I met with them, and they started sending me out to see photographers, and a few photographers kind of took a shining to me and started working with me. And so that kind of just got the ball rolling. And I was still at school, so it was hard to, juggle all that at the same time, and also be 15 and dealing with being a 15-year-old.
Do you remember your first photo session and how you felt while it was going on?
I do. I remember I went to see this wonderful photographer and a wonderful person called Tony McGee, and he was getting pretty popular back then. I mean, now he's sort of in England anyway. He's sort of legendary. But I remember. I can remember exactly, Jay. I remember exactly. I remember I kind of wore like a strange outfit, and I remember going in to see him, and I had nothing to show, like a couple of Polaroids or like a couple of snapshots. Literally, I had no professional photos. And he's like, "Come in the studio. I'm gonna take a picture of you right now." And they had wonderful. They had just finished a session, like a proper photo shoot. And so he had this sort of makeup and hair team do me, and it was the first time I've ever seen myself in real hair and makeup. And I remember they slicked my hair back, like literally slicked it. And I don't think I've ever seen myself that way before. And they put me in like a very sort of sexy black dress, and I'm 15, and I was literally like, who is that person in the mirror? And I can remember, I mean, I still have the shot somewhere. I remember it was when they were still, you still had slides. And it was very weird because you were sort of faced with, you realize that, you can be sort of shape-shifted into so many different looks.
Right, they can make you look the way they want you to look.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the camera's amazing.
Something I'll always remember.
So you went from that to eventually being on the cover of Vogue and Cosmopolitan. Tell me how that felt.
Oh, great. The Vogue cover was particularly amazing. I was working with this very, very well-known photographer called Terence Donovan in London. I was still living in London. And actually, no, I moved to New York, and he hired me for a British Vogue shoot in Paris. It was the Paris couture collections. And I remember that there had been no British model on the cover of British Vogue for 25 years or something.
Wow.
And they did a sort of test cover shoot during this shoot in Paris. And it was like literally, when you're a kid and you're like, you have these dreams. And that was my dream, was to be on the cover of Vogue, because at that time it was really like the
Mm-hmm.
pinnacle of success. And we did a test photo shoot. And then I remember a couple of months after, they had sent me the sort of proof of the photo spread, and I made the cover, and I was like, I think I cried, because I
Wow.
was so excited, and plus it was British Vogue, which is where I grew up, so I knew that my friends would see, and it was just like one of those sort of moments that you'll never forget.
But you've
And the Cosmo,
also been on Cosmopolitan, and how
yeah,
many times
oh,
have you been
I
on
lost it.
magazine covers?
Oh my gosh, probably like 80 different covers.
Wow.
The Cosmo cover, the first Cosmo cover was amazing because Francesco Scovullo he did all the covers in the 80s for Cosmopolitan, and that was also considered like a kind of prestige booking.
Hmm.
He only really used like the top girl, so I was really really surprised that like I got a shot at that, and then I did another one with him a couple of years after that too. And then I did some German Cosmo covers and British Cosmo covers. So yeah, woo.
There goes the telephone. Well, while you set that back up, okay, so now you've been doing modeling,
Yes.
and eventually you get discovered. What was your first TV and or movie role?
My first movie role was Spies Like Us.
Uh huh.
And I really didn't, I had done a lot of school plays and I did like acting, but I never thought of doing it as a career. And I got a call from my model agent who said, this director, John Landis, wants to meet you. He's doing this movie, Spies Like Us, and it was kind of kismet in a way, because he happened to be in London at the time. And it was literally a week before Christmas, and I was heading to London to see my family. And so we figured out a time where I could meet him. It was literally like a couple of days before Christmas. So I met him, and I didn't really think anything of it.
Uh huh.
I just sort of went in like any, I just had a little conversation with him, and he asked me what I'd sort of have I been on film before, and blah blah blah. And anyway, I didn't think anything of it. And then about a month later, I heard, oh, he really liked you, and he wants to meet you again. He's going to be in Washington. I was living in New York at this point, so I was back in New York, and he had me come to Washington. We had another meeting, and about 2 weeks later, I found out that I got the part, and I really didn't have any idea what to expect. I mean, there wasn't really much acting ability required for the role, so I just sort of read
Mm.
the script and just sort of went to Norway and London where we shot it and hoped for the best. And I mean, it literally changed my life, because it got me it just opened up this whole world of movie making. And because it was a huge movie, it's a big budget movie, studio movie with big
Mm.
stars, I was sort of thrown in the deep end in a way, because I thought that was sort of, I started out on the sort of A list, with A list people, and I didn't realize that it doesn't always work out that way.
So,
So it
so
was
what was it like working with Dan Aykroyd and Chevy Chase in that one?
those days, yeah, great. I mean, they were, they were at their height of their fame, and I mean, I think they're still brilliant. So they've actually just gotten better, really. But
Did you get any pointers from them, acting pointers?
I would say probably not from Chevy, but he was sort of doing his own thing. But Dan a little bit. Like I remember Dan was very sweet. Like when I had my first sort of like close up.
Uh
I
huh.
mean, I didn't understand the technical side of it at all. And I remember when I had to look at him during that, like right before the world's going to end, and we go off into our little that moment. I
Uh huh.
remember it was really late. It was like 3 in the morning, and like he came to do my off camera, which was really sweet, because he didn't have to do that, but like he knew that I was new and I needed to look at something that was could make it more believable. So he was
Hmm.
very sweet in that regard. But John Landis also was very helpful, and they. I mean, it wasn't much. It was more just like taking it all in and dealing with all what it's like to make a movie. Like there wasn't much for me that was demanded in terms of like acting skill. But just the whole experience was so incredible, and I met amazing people on it, and we got to go to Norway and shoot at Pinewood Studios. So that was right at the gate. So that I was spoiled, and and I was hooked. I
So,
was
so
hooked
the
from that
scene
on.
where you get out and you're stepping out, and I think you're putting your clothes on or off or something like that. But anyway,
Yeah,
that was filmed in Norway, or where exactly was that at? And were you
yeah.
actually in the snow?
We were actually in the snow. We were in Norway. We shot all the parts of the movie that were supposed to be Russia in Norway, and
Hmm.
most of the interiors were done in at Pinewood Studios. They did shoot a little bit in Los Angeles, but I wasn't in that part. But yeah, no. So we were actually on location. So all those incredible shots of the fjords and all the snow stuff, that was
Hmm.
all placed at the fjords in Norway. It was, and I can't believe I didn't like see the aurora borealis when I was there. It's like I'm sure it was there because it was like winter, and I was so like myopically focused on the movie that like now I would like, oh my god, I'm dying to go back to Norway and take in all the nature, because I mean
Right.
obviously you can't help but take it in, but now I would like have a different approach to being in Norway.
And you transitioned from snowy environment to beach environment. You appeared on Baywatch.
Yes, that was one of my first gigs in LA, I think. Yeah. Yeah, that was wild too, because it was sort of the beginning of the series. I think I was in season two, right? So
Hmm.
it was the beginning of Baywatch. It wasn't really, I mean, it was starting to become popular, but it wasn't. It was just sort of starting out. It was pre Pam Anderson and all that. So,
Hmm. So,
but it was. I
you,
actually learned a lot from that show because
yeah.
technically I wasn't really that great still, and so you learn from each experience. You learn a little more of the technical side of things, and that was one of the first roles I really had to kind of walk and talk and do
Hmm.
actually like do multiple things at once, which I wasn't really used to. And I remember the cast and crew being really super sweet and supportive and helping me through that. And I mean, and I got to shoot in the beach and in Los Angeles. I mean, how can you not like that, right?
Exactly. And how did you transition from doing, and tell me about any other TV series you may have done, but then you ended up on the Weird Science series. How did that
Yeah.
progress?
Um, I remember I had been working quite a bit doing a lot of episodic, and so there was a little bit more of sort of radar of who of me in LA. And when they were casting Weird Science, they pretty much saw every every pretty girl in LA. And I remember I was in Australia actually shooting a show called Time Tracks.
Hmm.
And they sent me the script for Weird Science, and I thought it was cute and fun, but I hadn't really done that much comedy, so I wasn't really sure if I could. And it was very written, very not sitcom because it wasn't a multi-camera show,
Hmm.
but it was definitely had obviously it was comedic, so I wasn't even really sure if I could do it that well.
Had you seen the
Um,
original movie?
I had seen the original movie, yeah, but I didn't sort of go back and like look at it a bunch of times before this whole process, because I didn't want to like feel like I was going to emulate Kelly.
Hmm.
But so I when I met with them when I got back from Australia, just a meeting, and I sat with the showrunners, and it was a lengthy process. It was, I think, about an 8-part process,
Hmm.
and eventually it led to the test, the network test, and they had already cast the guys. So fortunately, when I got to the end of the casting process, I
Hmm.
was able to read audition with the other actors, which makes a big difference.
Hmm.
So, and I was also comfortable at that point. By the time I got to the final step, I had done the scene so many times with
Hmm.
the actors who played the roles, that I felt pretty comfortable, and I got it, and I oh,
Oh,
what did I
there
do?
it goes again.
Oh my
Oh,
god, I'm gonna
tripods
mess
are
up the.
wonderful things. Anyway, okay, so here you are, and you're getting possibly cast for Weird Science, but you were originally considered for the role of Xena, correct?
Oh yeah, no, I actually they wrote the part for me. They wrote the part for me, Rob Tapper. So this is I've said this story many times, so forgive me for anyone who's heard this already. But um, I when Weird Science came up, uh, Hercules, the whatever it was called, Hercules, also came up at the same time, and that shot in New Zealand, and Weird Science shot in LA. And long story short, basically, Rob Tapert, who created Hercules, I had gone in, I think, for Dayanara, the role of Dayanara, and he really liked me, but I was also up for Weird Science at the same time, and I started to feel like Weird Science was a better fit for me. And oh my God, this is crazy. Is this going to ruin the...
No, it's okay. Whoa, there we go again. It's like you're turning flips. It's funny on this side. It's hilarious. It's like, well, there she goes. She flipped over again. It's actually kind
Sorry.
It's
about how
sweet.
My mind is. This is about my mind. This is a good reflection of what's going on in here.
Viewers are going to say, okay, now I'm getting dizzy.
Okay. So I read for the role in the original Hercules, and Weird Science at the same time, and I decided to go with Weird Science. But Rob Tapert had really liked me, and so they decided to create this role of Xena, and it was originally a 3-part character in Hercules, and so I was on a longish hiatus from Weird Science, so it kind of worked out perfectly that I was off for 3 months and I could go do these 3 episodes. And Rob Tapert literally wrote it for me. Like, he wrote Xena for me, and I'm saying that like braggadociously. I don't mean it that way.
Eat your heart out, Lucy Lawless.
Yeah. Well, Lucy has since thanked me so many times, because I honestly, Jay, I feel like I was supposed to get out of the way for her to get that role, because she ended up marrying Rob Tapert, and they had 3 kids, and I believe they're still together, and that was supposed to be her role. And I did 6 weeks of training to play her, because there's a lot. It was very physical, and I had a martial arts trainer and a horse. I had to learn how to ride a horse really well and do all the broadsword fighting. I mean, there was a lot of physical stuff that had to be learned. So I did that for 6 weeks, and I went back to England. This was sort of right at the end of the year, and I went back to England to see my family for Christmas, and I got really, really sick. Like, on the flight, I got one of those horrible, like, flus, like the flu before COVID, and the early 90s COVID version. And I was literally could not get out of bed, and I needed to get on a flight to New Zealand, like, the 29th of December, because we were shooting like January 2nd or something. And I literally couldn't get out of my bed to the bathroom, let alone across the country. I mean, across the world.
Yeah.
So because everything in LA pretty much shuts down between Christmas and New Year, they desperately had to find somebody to replace me, and they were not happy about it at all. And but I think Lucy had done a little episode for them, or they knew her somehow, and she was already in New Zealand because she's from New Zealand.
Right.
So they cast her, and she did such an incredible job, and her character became so popular that they literally spun off that character into Xena, the warrior princess. So I wouldn't have been able to do the series even if I'd done the Hercules part, you know what I mean? Because I was still shooting Weird Science, and I was under contract. So, but the interesting thing about that is that I think that they would have probably cast not Lucy, like somebody else, because they wouldn't have needed to find someone in New Zealand right away. So it's interesting how it all turned out. But I really, and I've seen Lucy a bunch of times since then, and she's so sweet, and she's always gives me mention of like, oh my God, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be Xena. So
is it possible to actually be shooting 2 TV series, starring in both at the same time, or is that difficult?
No, you can't do it. Like, I mean, at least then you couldn't. I don't know now. It's like, usually back then if you were doing it under contract to a TV show, they owned you.
Yeah.
They were like, it was 22 episodes a season. I mean, it was a lot. Like, it's different now because it's streaming and there's see, most series do like 6 to 10 episodes or something. This was back in the old days where you
Right.
churn them out.
Yes.
So it was different time for TV, but no, you couldn't do two. But each TV show had a hiatus. The hiatus was always used to be from like May to the July now, but that's all different now too. But you still can't like be a series regular on two separate shows. Or at least you didn't used to be able to. But you know what? I actually don't know now if that's true or not.
Yeah, it may have changed. So at some point during all of this, you're doing, you're testing for Xena, you're doing weird science, and you developed your own clothing line. Tell me about that.
Yeah, that wasn't until quite a bit later. That was like 2009.
Mm-hmm.
I used to sew a lot when I was younger, and make my own clothes. But something I hadn't done since I moved to since I started my adult life. And I made a dress that I couldn't find in the stores, and it was sort of this vintage kind of cool 70s vintage like silk jersey fabric that I thought was so cool. And that's when maxi dresses were really in. So I made this dress, and I went into this store in LA. It's quite a well-known store called Fred Siebel.
Mm-hmm.
It's been there since like the early 70s, but it's very popular, and they have like new and different designers. It's not all the typical stuff.
Right.
And so I went into that store, and I knew the girl who worked there, and she was talking to the buyer of the store,
Mm-hmm.
and she said, "Oh, I love your dress. Like, can you make some for the store?" And I was like, "Well, I don't know, maybe." And but it was like vintage fabric, so it was actually really hard to find. So that became like a whole learning curve of how do I make like 400 dresses. And anyway,
Well,
so I
don't
got
you
into
just
it,
make one and then they duplicate it, or is that how it's done?
Yeah, well, you basically, you make a pattern, and it was more tracking down the fabric, being able to do it at a price where you can, make some kind of profit margin. It's a complicated business. Well, it's not complicated, but it's, I had no idea about the clothing industry. I mean, you'd think I would because I was a model, but I knew about the sort of photographing clothes, but I didn't know about what went into production. And obviously I was just starting out, and I ended up getting, having a partner, and we got like a little, we weren't sewing everything ourselves or anything like that. We were doing the samples ourselves, but, but it was, I did it for about 4 years, and it was very rewarding in some ways, because it was the first thing not the first thing, but I really had to learn from the get-go. I mean, I guess I did with acting and modeling too, but this was just I have fond memories of that time, because I felt actually almost more proud of that working, when it was working, than my modeling or acting in a way, because I felt like I did it with no help whatsoever.
Wow. Well, when I met you through Musetta, I knew of only one thing you had ever been on, and that was Stargate SG-1. And that was it. And I was doing research last night to get ready for this interview, and I'm going through your reels and different things, and I'm like, oh my gosh, she's done a lot more than I thought. I mean, we're going to get to Kingpin, but talk about your Stargate character and any funny stories that comes from the set.
Oh my gosh. Well, that's where I met Musetta. So that was the best part of, that was the best part of doing Stargate, actually, was meeting her. And
which, by the way, I interviewed her a couple of weeks ago. My
yes.
interview's on YouTube for the viewers, so they know.
Yeah, she's great.
Yeah, but go ahead and tell your story.
Yeah, so she, so I met her, but it was actually, it's a very challenging role, because when you play Tok'ra, as you know, you have a symbiote and a host, and you have to go in and out of these two different characters, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And their language is very different. It may not seem that when you're watching the show, but when you have to learn that dialogue,
right,
the way they write the Tok'ras is very hard to remember, because they don't phrase it the way the way your brain, or at least my brain, wanted to say those words.
And it's
So
made
you
up
had to
words.
almost learn it like another language.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So it was really hard. It was really, really, I have to say that was the hardest job I've ever done in that regard. And, it's a TV show, and, you're always running against the clock on TV. Like you always, and, it's a very ambitious show with huge sets, and everybody was wonderful on it. I mean, Richard Dean Anderson couldn't be sweeter. And I would say funny stories is there was a bunch of scenes with me and Christopher Judge and Musetta where Christopher Judge is a little bit of a jokester.
Yeah.
So he was, he's one of those actors that sort of jokes around, and then but then he like, as soon as the camera's like running, it's serious business, and he's excellent, and he does exactly what he's required of him. But in between that, like, he's joking around, and Musetta and I were just like trying so hard not to laugh. There was the scene I remember where I think she died or something, and she's like on this like stretcher. It's a very somber scene, or she's sick or something. I can't remember exactly, but I remember. I mean, we bonded over that because we just couldn't help but laugh at some of the stuff that Christopher was up to. But no, I mean, it was great. It was shot up in Vancouver, which is always nice to go up there and work.
Yeah, Christopher's a great guy. I met him in Biloxi, Mississippi, and he's one of those guys where, like you say, it's a straight face, but when you see him smile, look out, it's going to be a joke or something.
Yeah, he's a joke. He's a prankster.
Yes,
he's fun. He's so fun though. Like, he's great when you. I haven't done a panel with him for a long time, but I remember doing a panel with him at a Comic-Con, and he's just great. Like, those are the kind of actors you want to be doing panels with.
Okay. Well, that brings up another question, and that is, you do sci-fi conventions, and do you have any coming up this year? And what's it like doing a convention?
Well, I was doing a lot for a while, and now I started out actually doing them mostly for Stargate and Sci-Fi, because that following is the fans of Sci-Fi are particularly loyal and very interested. So I started doing them initially for Stargate, and then it kind of shifted to more nostalgia. I'm sure you're aware of this too. Like in the last 10 years, particularly, there seems to be a sort of thirst for 80s and 90s nostalgia. So then it sort of shifted to more of my 80s movies and 90s movies. Interest in that, and I love doing them because you get to meet people that you would never normally meet in my life in LA, and I get to go to cities that I may not go to, like, on my own, and so I always look at it as an opportunity to travel and to see some of the city that I'm going to, and it's fun. I mean, the first time I did them, it was a little overwhelming, and I remember doing my first panel, and I didn't know how to answer some of the questions, because the fans, especially for Sci-Fi, sometimes they know more details of the entire series than you do. Because people forget, really, as an actor, it's a job, and you can like the show and appreciate the show, and maybe you've watched it, but maybe some actors are as avid fans as some of the of the fans are, but it's but I've grown to really love them. I've grown to really, really enjoy them, and met some incredible people. I was just in Portland, Maine, which I hadn't been to in 30 years or something, and met some incredible people. And I'm doing one, I believe, in Tennessee in October, but I kind of cut down on doing too many of them. Because there's a 2-year stretch where I literally did probably 20, and it was like too much.
Yeah, it just gets exhausting traveling all over.
Yeah.
As a working actress, was it difficult for you during the pandemic and the writer's strike?
Very.
Yeah.
Actors get used to not working consistently. I mean, you can have like a great stretch, and then you can, it's ebbs and flows. So you do get somewhat used to that. But when obviously when COVID happened, obviously everyone in the world was affected, but our business, we couldn't do anything, and
right.
It was it was very frustrating and it was very strange. And the strike last year, frankly, was not fun either. But and the business has just changed so much in the last few years. I mean, I really don't know where we all stand anymore.
Yeah.
With the AI and the just the shape, the way that the TV and streaming and movie industry has shifted. It's just, I have people that ask for my advice, or I'll meet at a Comic-Con
Yeah.
about wanting to get into this industry, and I literally can't even advise people anymore because the industry I went into in the mid 80s is completely utterly different than it is today.
Yeah.
And there's so many different platforms now, and I really I kind of feel like a dinosaur. I
No,
mean, I'm
you're
still working, if you know,
yeah.
I'm still working, and I'm still um and I still enjoy it, but I the business side of it is just so different that I don't know really what to make of it
Yeah.
anymore. But yeah, no, last year was very hard, and I had also been on a run of working a lot. I think I did like 9 movies in 2 years. So I was really on a kind of roll where I was working, and then maybe I'd have a few weeks off, and then I was doing another one, and then it kind of all halted for a bit, and that was strange.
Yeah. It's
And
like a
also
shutdown.
financially, it's not great when things shut down like that too.
Yeah. Speaking of AI, what are your thoughts on being scanned and possibly put into a show and it's not actually you there? What is your thoughts on AI in the industry?
I don't think it belongs in the arts.
Right.
I don't. I mean, I think that there's great uses for it. In the medical, maybe in medical, in certain areas, I think that it has its use, but I don't believe it's needed in. I mean, and I honestly, I mean, I'm probably disappoint many of your listeners, but I don't care for the heavily, CGI AI movies. All
Hmm.
there's too much. They all look the same now. I mean, the Marvel, the superheroes, and all. I don't. I mean, I'm going to sound probably very old now, but I like human stories. I like stories where I can relate. I don't. I just am not. I'm not interested in the AI. I can appreciate it. I can appreciate the technology and the imagery that it can create,
Yeah.
but I don't really. It's not something that I feel relate to really.
Have you ever considered writing a script, writing a TV show or a movie?
Yeah, I feel like I have a script in me. Like, I mean, who doesn't, right? Everybody has a script in them. But I do have a coming of age story that I would like to tell at some point, because I think when I look back on my life now, it was it's just that what I went through at this particular phase of my life, I feel has affected and colored my entire life and existence.
Hmm.
So I feel like it's a part of my story that I need to that would actually be cathartic and helpful for me to be able to tell,
Hmm.
because that's I'm sure you feel this too. It's like when you start to look back in your life, it's like a movie. It's like this story
Right.
that's
Multiple stories.
unfolded, multiple story. It's so, I mean, it's wild, right? And I think as the older I get and the more I can distance myself and look at it more objectively. I mean, I've had quite a wild life. When I say wild, I don't mean like wild crazy, but like just, well, some of it. I mean, a lot of it was wonderful, and a lot of it was very painful. And I mean, I've really like had a life that most people don't know about. Like they
Hmm.
see the end product, or they see you in a movie or a TV show or a picture or a photo, whatever modeling thing, and I get that that's part of what we do. It's projection. It's like they want, people project onto you what they imagine. And that's a beautiful thing too, in a
Hmm.
way, because you're creating a fantasy experience for people. And that has a lot of value, but it doesn't now as I'm older and I've gone through a lot of growth. I feel like the truth of my story,
Hmm.
nobody knows about that except for, obviously very, very few people
Yeah.
in, my close personal life. And that to me is what's interesting about me. Not the sort of shiny sparkly part
Yeah.
that people tend to like be attracted to.
So maybe you could write an autobiography in the future.
Yeah, I have thought about that because I mean, I have had a very interesting life, and I've met some incredibly interesting people, and I've been influenced by some very interesting people. I mean, we all meet interesting people, but
Hmm.
I really have had quite the life, and I don't know. I mean, I would like to have the courage to do that at some point, but there's also a part of me that is very private, and I don't know if I
Right.
want to really disclose
Yeah, all of
everything
that.
that's ever happened to me.
That brings up
But
my
I do think
next question of
yeah.
image versus reality.
Mm.
Tell me about how you separate those two and how that makes you feel.
Oh God, that's such a good question. That is such a good question. That's I think what I've been grappling with.
Mm-hmm.
It's this idea that who I mean, really, isn't it? I mean, I remember. I don't know if you're familiar with an author called Joseph Campbell, but I remember looking into some of his work in the late 80s and early 90s, and I remember there was a quote that he had saying, "The privilege of a lifetime is knowing who you are."
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't really make that much sense to me for a long time. I think I'm saying it correctly, but it's along those lines. And I think that that's the journey. Is like I don't think I realized until really quite recently who I was.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the finding your authenticity and your own voice, and it is really what life is life's journey is about. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's very hard to understand that earlier on in your life, and you have so much stuff thrown at you. You have society, your parental influence, your schooling, your friends, peers, the war, I mean, culture, whatever. There's so much stuff, ideas, philosophy that's coming at you.
Mm-hmm.
And you're taking little snippets and pieces of all of it, and you're trying to figure out what makes sense to you and feels real to you. And so that's what I've really been grappling with. It's like the idea that who I am, especially who I am today, is doesn't really align with the image that people think of me
Mm-hmm.
as. And ultimately, it's not for me. I can't control what other people are going to think of me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not my business what they think of me, really. Like, I'm learning that too. So it's not about like taking it personally and like, oh, well, this is who I am. And it's not being like, oh, sort of indignant and like, you need to see me for who I really, it's not even that. It's just that it's an understanding that I need to be me for me.
Right.
And I even honestly, to be truly honest, like I'm having a really hard time even with social media now,
Mm-hmm.
because I understand that I have a following, and they want a certain thing from me, or they not want a certain thing, but like I have provided a certain thing, and
Mm-hmm.
that's what people respond to. And I understand with social media, a lot of it is it's a visual medium to a certain degree, and so people are attracted to certain visuals. I get that, but it doesn't really feel aligned with me now.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? Like
Yes.
I know that it's weird because I'm not really explaining it very well, but like there's this part of me that was obviously a model and an actor, and it was about being looking a certain way and being attractive and being seductive and being all these things, and I embrace all that, and I'm glad that people have responded to what they respond in that way, but it doesn't really feel like that's who I am fully now, and there's a
Mm-hmm.
part of me that wants people to know the the
The
the, the
real
full
you.
me,
Mm-hmm.
the real me.
When you
And
go
it's
out
not that
into
it's not that that's not real. It
mm-hmm.
is an aspect of me, but it's just an aspect of me, I guess.
Right. When you go out into public, do you feel like you're wearing a mask?
God, good question. No, I mean, no, I mean, it depends. I mean, like if I'm just going to like, the grocery store, no. But if if I'm going to like an industry setting, then obviously you have to kind of I put on the Vanessa Angel hat, which is expected of me, and it's not that I don't enjoy it. Like I can enjoy small talk and business talk, but it's just not. Whereas that was sort of a priority to me years ago. It's just not a priority to me now, and so yeah. I mean, there's not many people that like get to see the full, complete me.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that, but that's more being guarded because I've, realized, especially in the last few years, that I can't trust everybody.
Right.
I've been very hurt and very manipulated in this industry, as most actors have,
Mm.
and so I have to stay a little guarded, and I don't, and I think that I had a tendency to overshare and to sort of like not have strong boundaries. So I'm all these things I'm learning, which is, obviously affecting how I present and how I like I have a much easier time saying no now. Like
Right.
I'm okay saying no. Whereas before it's like I just wanted every opportunity, everything. Oh, maybe this could be this. This is like this sort of want, and this sort of desire to constantly be moving and doing something. And now I'm much more about being a human being and then a human doing. It's like I was a human doing for so long. And even though with my work I had to access, some very real things. I mean, that's ultimately what I've loved about acting is that I can access the true parts of me when it's required for a character. And I can learn about myself in a sense through that process. So it's a wonderful job. It's not that I'm belittling the job or bad mouthing the job, what I've had to do in my career, but it's interesting, right? It's just
Yes.
life's journey. It's like every year, like
Yeah.
you figure something different new out, and you hopefully. I mean, that's we all want to grow and evolve. Hopefully, I mean that's what we want to do as humans, right? Grow and evolve,
Right.
and try to get to a place of more peace. You
Exactly.
know,
I've known you for a few years, and I think I have noticed a lot of that change that you're talking about, and
have you?
seeing you begin to put up more and more boundaries, and that it seems to be important to you. Boundaries.
Yes, very important. And I didn't really realize I didn't have them before. Like, I mean, it really, not to get too in the weeds with my personal life, but, I was married for 22 years and you kind of get settled in this sort of role as a mom and a wife and obviously I was an actor and a model and stuff, but I've been, learning to have a real relationship with myself and
Mm-hmm.
at a much later stage of life. I think most people go through those years during college, and I didn't get that. Like I was right at the gate, 15, working, and I didn't. I finished school at 16, and I didn't get that experience. I mean, I got real life experience living in New York and being, doing all the stuff that I did, but I was kind of, it wasn't a quiet learning of, okay, who do I want to be in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like I've had that delayed. Like I had that experience in my 50s.
Yeah. So I
I mean, a
was.
lot of people look at that as a midlife crisis or something, but I think I never, I never had the first time around. You know?
I was going to ask you: was there a pivotal moment where you sat down and said, "Okay, I need to make these changes"? Was there something, a catapult for that, a pivotal moment?
No, I mean, I don't think it's been one moment. It's just been a series of realizations of,
Mm-hmm.
how do I be true to me? How do I figure out what I want? And some of that um, has required, me to just really approach everything in a different way. So it's almost like I feel like I've been unlearning and relearning a new way.
Mm-hmm.
But I wouldn't say that there was. I mean, obviously, my marriage fell apart 5 years ago, so that was probably the catalyst for a lot of this, inner work. But it's been a slow process, and even like every day there's something that comes up and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I didn't, more realization. So that's really to me more important than anything right now. And I know it's probably boring for other people to hear about because
No,
it's
not at all.
not shiny and and like, oh, look at me. But
Shiny, happy people.
it's an inner journey. Inner
Yeah.
journey.
Well, do you have tools that you use to help you with this self-realization, meditation, or yoga, or
Yeah.
Pilates?
Yeah, well, exercise for sure. Like that's my go-to. Like Pilates, it's like I couldn't live without exercise. And it's not even, I don't even do it. I mean, I obviously it helps that it keeps your muscles strong and tighter, but I do it for mentally, really. And, our wonderful friend Musetta has taught me Qigong sensations, which I probably do every day, which is basically scanning your body for, because I have I had a lot of anxiety and depression. And I've learned that a lot of that is stored in your body.
Exactly.
And qigong is a process in which you can literally sort of unarm the signals that are going off in your body, telling you, creating this sort of sense of alarm and distress. So she's been incredibly helpful. That's been an incredible process that I've integrated into my life. And just being in nature, like being in nature as much as possible. And now it's kind of being around the right people. Like I really notice like how I feel after I've left certain people or situations, and I'm
Certain
just much more
orbits.
protective of my space.
Okay, so what's coming up next for Vanessa Angel? You got any movies on tap, TV shows? What's happening
I
now?
I do. I'm actually going to Utah in about 3 weeks to do a sort of witch movie, a witch movie. And I just finished this thing called Censor Addiction, which is a sort of action sci-fi adventure. And I've worked with that director before, and he's super fun and sweet, so that was fun. And then I'm attached to about 3 movies. One called Zombie Bride, one called I Love You, and the other one it's a horror movie, and I'm completely blanking on the name of it right now. So I'm hoping that those 3 things actually get made this year, because with independent movies, you never know. Like sometimes the financing takes longer to get together, and so
Okay,
yeah.
and if somebody wanted to get like a cameo or a photograph or something from you, where would they go and get that?
Oh well, Cameo. I'm on Cameo, and I did. I had. I was selling photographs, like my classic, 8x10s, um, on my web page, but I accidentally deleted it, like the tech moron that I am, and I haven't, like, and took so long to put together, like literally, like because you got the shop and you got to link it to this. I was like, no, when I literally pressed one button and the whole shop came down. And I'm like,
Oh
no.
no.
And I haven't put it back up again. So once I get back and running, people can buy an autograph photograph from me there, but it's not up and running yet. And yeah, and I usually let people know on Instagram, like if I'm doing a Comic-Con or something where they can possibly meet me in person. So
Yeah, that's definitely the place to find you also as Instagram. You don't do Facebook, do you?
I do, but well, I don't, not very, very rarely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I started at Facebook, and then I don't know. I just prefer the Instagram is just much more visually appealing to me. I mean, even though that's kind of
Right.
gotten messy too.
Me
But like
too.
when I started doing Instagram, I liked the format of it better than Facebook. But it's like I can. I don't know. I mean, I do have a Facebook page, but I don't post on it as much as I do Instagram. But even with Insta, I'm trying to cut back on my social media because I feel like um, it can be a bit of a distraction.
Yeah. So, do you do the TikTok and the Snapchat and things
No,
like that? No,
no
none of
Snapchat,
that.
no TikTok.
Yeah.
Every time I see my daughter, I have to see like 15 like funny TikTok videos, and I'm like, oh my God, I never want to see TikTok again.
Well, Vanessa, thank you so much for being my guest. I have enjoyed this
Oh,
conversation so much.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry for the issues up front, but no, well, I adore you, and I appreciate you talking with me. And please send my love to your beautiful wife and continued friendship.
Thank you so much, and we will see you next time on The J. Michael Show.
Goodbye.